What's up YouTube? My name is JT and welcome back to yet another Elestrals video. It's been quite a week in Elestrals history. If you missed it, this past weekend was actually the first ever in-person premiere event for the Elestrals TCG over in Dallas, Texas, and I was lucky enough to be part of the few hundred people to travel out to the event and actually play in the main event of the Dallas Open. And I gotta say, it was one of the greatest experiences I've ever had playing any card game. I really can't emphasize enough just how enjoyable this event experience was overall. And I wanted to bring this video as kind of not only a first short recap of the event itself, but also bring you my deck profile of what I actually ended up playing for the main event itself. I'm not going to spend too much time on the event recap in this video, mostly because the event itself is actually very lenient on its rules surrounding media and filming in the venue, which means I was able to actually get a lot of footage of the event to put together a vlog style video for you guys that kind of encapsulates my overall experience with the event itself and the trip as a whole. So I don't really want to take too much away from that video because I think that's going to be a video that you guys are really going to enjoy. But definitely stay tuned for that vlog because it will be coming out soon. Again, I'm working very hard on getting that video out in the coming days. So if you don't want to miss that, make sure you go down and hit the subscribe button so you don't miss another upload of mine in the future. So yeah, Dallas. This was a wild experience, I gotta say. Obviously, it is the first time Elestrals is ever putting on an in-person premiere event of this scale. But I've been playing Yu-Gi-Oh for years and I've traveled to many events, many YCSs, nationals, and stuff like that. So I kind of came into this event with some kind of expectation of how it was going to be run and how it was going to be set up. And I gotta say, after playing this weekend, this event exceeded all expectations of what I could possibly have hoped for. The event itself was run super smoothly. There were hardly any hiccups in the actual tournament throughout the weekend. And I think most of all, every single person that I interacted with for the couple days that I was out there was just an absolute pleasure to be around. I think that was the coolest part. Walking into the venue, you could just tell that there was this kind of welcoming aura around everybody. Like everybody wanted to be there. People were just so excited to play Elestrals in person with each other. And I think it was really cool just being able to put a name to the faces of a lot of these people that I've seen in the webcam events that we've been playing, or just seeing their names floating around in Discord. And it's something that's unlike any other event I've ever been to. It was really hard to explain, but it was just such a cool experience overall, and I really enjoyed that aspect of the event. The event itself was also, I think, Elestral's first time doing a two-day event, meaning that the tournament was actually played on both Saturday and Sunday of that weekend. Myself and the group that I was staying with actually flew in on that Friday, meaning we got to stay for basically 3 days in Texas, playing nothing but Elestrals for the whole weekend. The way the format worked was that it was 8 rounds of Swiss on Saturday, and then at the end of that day, the top 16 players remaining based off of record would move on to a top cut single elimination bracket on Sunday until eventually a champion was decided. There were 192 players in the main event, meaning that at the end of those 8 rounds of Swiss on Saturday, in order to make the top 16 cut, any player that had a record of X1 or better automatically made it through, while there was some of the X2s that would make it in based off of tiebreakers, and anybody with an X3 record or below was guaranteed out of the event no matter what. So in order to make that top 16 cutoff, we had to ensure at least a record of X2 in order to give ourselves a chance. And at the end of those 8 rounds of Swiss on Saturday, I did end up finishing with a 6-2 record, which was good enough to get into that top 16 cutoff. Unfortunately, my tiebreakers just weren't good enough, and I ended up bubbling out of top cut at 25th place. Again, I'll go over more of the tournament recap in the vlog itself whenever that comes out. But if you don't know how Elestrals tournaments work, basically you don't just have your overall record, but you also have a tiebreaker score that is basically calculated based off of the win rates of the people that you play. So if you beat better players that do well in the tournament, then the better your tiebreaker will be for those cases where tiebreakers help you get into top cut. And unfortunately, both of my losses came relatively early in the tournament, meaning that my opponent's win record for the rest of the event was relatively low, and it was just going to be really difficult for me to get into the top 16 anyway. And unfortunately, my tiebreakers just weren't good enough, and I barely missed out on that top 16 cut. However, I really can't be mad with my performance. Obviously, I would have loved to top the event, but I think 25th place, especially after losing both my games that early, I think was a really good performance for me, especially given the circumstances with my deck choice for the event. So let me give you guys a little bit of backstory here. So myself and my group ended up flying out to the event on Friday morning, and the way that they had the event set up was that we didn't have to have a deck submitted for the event until about an hour before round 1 on Saturday, meaning that we had all of Friday to basically test and tweak our decks and make sure that everything was perfect for the event. Now, obviously, I'm a competitive player first, and I really wanted to have a good showing at this event. So I did a lot of testing in the weeks before we flew out to Dallas. I think in the weeks after the March 8th webcam premiere event, which was the last premiere event before the Dallas Open, the expectation was that there were going to be 3 primary decks that realistically had the best chance of taking down the Dallas Open. Those decks were Lunar Aggro, Blizzstrix, and Heal Control. Now, in order to give myself the best chance of doing well at this event, I knew that I wanted to play one of those 3 decks. Lunar Aggro has obviously been the most successful deck in Moonrise format, but it was a deck that I felt like was kind of a known quantity at this point, and there weren't that many innovations coming around in the Lunar Aggro deck. So I felt that going into the event, the deck was just going to be too hardly prepared for by other people in the room, so I didn't really want to commit to playing that deck. In the case of Blizzstrix, Blizz is an interesting deck because it's definitely the most explosive deck that Elestrals has ever seen, and it's a deck that can easily take down events if you run hot for a day. Blizz also tends to have a pretty good matchup into the other 2 main decks that we expected to see in Dallas. Obviously, the biggest downside with Blizz is that it can be a very luck-dependent deck at times. If you don't mill the right cards when you need them, or if you draw too many of your bricks, then you could just be in for a very bad time, and I didn't want to put myself through 8 rounds of just hoping that neither of those outcomes came true. So that left one more deck that we were expecting, and that is the Heal Control deck. And I have to say, in the weeks that I was testing before this event, that deck felt insane. In the weeks that I was testing that deck, I was taking it to locals, I was testing it in our testing group, and I was just absolutely cleaning house left and right with that deck. It was by far the best thing that I tested, and I think about a week before the event, I decided that I was going to lock in that deck choice and just kind of tune it up with some minor changes here and there before Dallas actually came around. And that was the deck I was going to play for the main event. And then came Friday. So myself and my group ended up flying out to the event on Friday morning, which meant that we had basically the entire day to test and tweak our decks before we had to actually submit our deck lists by Saturday morning. And it was actually a really good setup because it was myself and 6 of my other friends all on an Airbnb on Friday night. And we were all basically playing different decks at the time. We had somebody on Lunar Aggro, somebody on Blizzstrix, somebody on Genies, which is another deck that we were preparing for this event. One was on Fire Nexus, we had a Wind Tempo, and then obviously I was playing Heal. So we had a really good spread. Nobody was playing the same deck. We got to test against all of our different matchups and kind of tweak our main decks and our side decks to kind of make sure that we had every matchup covered for the event itself. And I don't know what happened or how this is even possible, but my testing on that Friday went miserably. I had probably a sub 20% win rate playing the Heal deck that I had been demolishing every single game that I'd been playing for the weeks prior. And it really just scared me ultimately off of playing the deck. Like I got to a point where it was probably 1 a.m. the night before the tournament. And I was like, if this is going to happen in the event, I can't play this deck. I have to change to something else. It really did just scare me because it kind of showed me like, yeah, you could be having this really good run for weeks prior, but all it takes is just one bad session like I just had against a multitude of different decks, and then my tournament is done right away. And I just got really scared off that, and I decided that I had to make a change off of the Heal deck to something else, basically last minute right before the event. I played around with a couple ideas, but ultimately there was nothing that I could have played that I was comfortable enough with because I didn't have enough time to actually test and get comfortable with it. So I decided on something that I had just been super comfortable with before, a deck that I've been playing for multiple formats at this point. And that is, of course, my best friend himself, VOLTEMPEST. That's right. About 8 hours before round 1 of the Dallas Open, I decided to switch decks to my old reliable, the VOLTEMPEST deck. And I'm very, very glad that I did because this deck was absolutely insane for the weekend. Obviously, it's something that I've been comfortable with. If you've been following me for a while, you know that I've been playing VOLTEMPEST basically since the game released. And I just absolutely love this card and I love this deck. And like I said, I felt very comfortable with it. I felt like I can play it to a very high level. And then I ended up taking it to a 25th place finish, which I think is very good. So that's enough yapping for me. Let's just get right into the deck profile, and I'll show you guys what I ended up taking to the Dallas Open 2025. So not only is VOLTEMPEST a deck that I'm very comfortable with playing, but it's also a deck that I thought was going to be a good choice into what we expected to see in the Dallas event itself. It has a very good matchup into both the heal control and the lunar aggro decks. As long as VOLTEMPEST hits the board in either of those matchups, there isn't any cards in the most common list for either of them that can out this card, actually. So if this card hits the board in either of those matchups, I should expect to win both of them every single time. The only downside with VOLTEMPEST in this format is that it does kind of have a little bit of a suspect matchup into the Blitzstrix deck, because Blitzstrix is one of the very few cards in the game that is actually an inherent out to VOLTEMPEST while Zeus is on the board, which can be very scary for this deck to deal with. Luckily, I only ended up playing one Blitzstrix deck throughout the weekend, and I 2-0'd them, and I didn't have to face another Blitzstrix for the rest of the event. So thank heavens for that, because I think the Blitzstrix matchup for this deck can be a little suspect at times. But let's get right into the card by card for the list itself. Starting off, of course, with the main boy himself, VOLTEMPEST, and of course, his little brother, the double Griffuse, to help get him out. Like I said, I've been saying for several formats, this card is an absolute house. There are very few decks in the entire game's history that have very easy outs to this card. And basically, for all the time that I've been playing this deck, there have been very few games where I've gotten VOLTEMPEST on the board and have lost the game. This card just wins the game on its own. It has a very good matchup, like I said, into a lot of the decks that we expected. And it did exactly what it was supposed to all weekend long. Every single game that I got VOLTEMPEST on the board and powered by Zeus, I won that game. So this card's just an absolute house. A lot of decks just don't have really good ways to deal with it. And as long as you play smart, play around cards like Shield of Achilles when you don't need to, play around whatever certain outs that your opponent might have to it, this card will just carry you to victory every single time. Absolutely love this boy. This card was absolutely insane. Next up, we have to have our supporting cast in order to help our VOLTEMPEST get on the board. And that, of course, in the Thunder deck is going to start with 3 copies of Astrabbit. There's not much more to say about Astrabbit at this point. It is still the best card in the game. I think it'll continue to be the best card in the game for years to come. And obviously there's extra synergy in this deck because we are just inherently playing a lot of Thunder cards, which means we have a lot of synergy and able to trigger this card multiple times in a game, sometimes even multiple times in a turn. Astrabbit is obviously one of the best cards in the game. Can't go without it in this deck. Next, we have our power one-ofs for the Thunder archetype, our one of Elechic and the one of Arcolith. It might be a little suspect playing this deck or seeing people play this deck now that Elechic is limited, which means that you technically have less access to your Zeus, which is obviously a primary piece that you need for your combos. But really, playing this deck at this event and in the few times that I've been playing it in the format beforehand, I never really felt like I had less access to Zeus. Like, I felt like every single time that I needed Zeus, I had access to it. Obviously, you're going to see later in the list how many Zeus we're actually playing in the list, but I didn't feel like I ended up missing out on the Zeus all that often. Obviously, I would like to have 3 copies, but Elechic being at 1 copy itself isn't that big of a hindrance to the deck itself. And then playing the one of Arcolith, I'm a big proponent for this card. I think this card is absolutely insane. Obviously, it has really good synergy in this deck because you're just playing a ton of Thunder, so this card is basically always live, and you can do things like re-enchant your Zeus or re-enchant your rabbits that are on board, which is obviously very good. But also, this card is just really good at kind of a plan B for this deck. You're not always going to be able to get the VOLTEMPEST on the board, and you need kind of a way to close out games because the Thunder cards that we're playing, or just the Elestrals that we're playing, might not be as good at pushing tempo as other archetypes are. And being able to drop an Arcolith late game, load it up with 5 spirits, and then hit for a ton of damage, just kind of another alternate win condition, is absolutely super powerful. This card is very, very good. I absolutely loved playing it in this list. I definitely think I would continue to play it going forward. Moving on with our Thunder Elestrals, we're actually playing a smaller Thunder package in this list. So the only other Thunder Elestrals we're playing is actually 2 copies of Quackle, and then a sole copy of Boombat. And that's the only Thunder Elestrals that we're actually playing in this list. The reasoning being is I didn't want to clutter my list with unnecessary cards. A lot of other Thunder heavy lists, or even other Voltempest lists, will play a heavier Thunder package with cards like Joltin and Toxion, and then by proxy Mount Olympus and Race from the Top. But I didn't feel like those cards were impactful enough or had enough staying power in the current format. And I didn't really want to play those cards in this list. I didn't want to clutter the list. So I just wanted to play the most impactful names that I could to kind of facilitate my plays and kind of win every single board state as often as possible. So I kind of just went with the smaller Thunder package in this deck, going with the 2 Quackle. This card is very, very good, obviously, because healing is very important in the meta, with heal control being one of the more popular decks in the format itself. Having 2 copies of this card to refill your spirits at any time and kind of just give you more chances to get that Voltempest out at some point in the game. Really good card. And then the 1 Boombat in the main deck was a little bit of a contentious choice. The only reason that this card is in the main deck is specifically going along the lines of what I said about how this deck has a very tough Blistrix matchup at times. Meaning that I wanted to give my main deck as many chances to help beat that Blistrix deck in game 1 as possible. Obviously, we have a lot of answers in the side deck that'll help in games 2 and 3 with beating out the Blistrix deck. But obviously, I don't want to just give up game 1 against Blizz if they mill well. So I want to have some kind of outs to that deck in the main deck, which is where the 1 Boombat came along. And it also comes up in just other matchups too. Any other real game plan deck out there, this card can be very good into. I played a Wasp Ivy deck this weekend that this card came up in. Any other deck that's just playing a really big Ascensions that are typically very hard to out, this card comes up a lot, and it has a lot of synergy, obviously, because we are already playing a lot of Thunder cards in this deck. Very good cards. Really loved both of them in this deck. Next up, the other supplementary cards that we're playing, obviously because we're not playing the heavy Thunders, what we're substituting for the Thunders for instead is a heavier Wind Elestral package. We're playing 3 copies of Sorlet, 1 copy of Pegus, and 1 copy of Galaxair. Now, one of the kind of, I guess, discoveries that myself and my testing group made leading into this event overall was that wind cards were absolutely broken. The way that this format has kind of shaken up, it's been largely similar to past formats we've seen with 5s decks, where a lot of the top decks like Looter Aggro and Heal Control are very low to the ground. They play they just play 1-drops a turn that can kind of just out whatever you have on the board, threaten whatever you have on the board, and just kind of win by slowly controlling the board state and the spirit advantage across the game. And the wind cards, when you read them, they basically do the exact same thing a lot of those cards end up doing. Galaxair is like another copy of Eddie, essentially, because it just swaps attack and defense similar to the way Eddie swaps battle positions. The other thing that I really like about Galaxair itself is that it's a 4 defense, which means that unlike Eddie, it's not vulnerable to cards like Cryoblast, which I think is really cool. It's also sometimes not susceptible to cards like PTA in a way that Eddie is as well, because this can target any Elestral on the board, meaning it can target itself or target another Elestral on your board if you do end up getting PTA'd on the Galaxair, and you're able to still swing in over some Elestrals in the game that way. And then Sorlet is similar to Eddie, where it's also a card that swaps battle position, which basically allows you to beat over any Elestral, any 1-drop Elestral in the game at that point. And the better thing about this card that Eddie doesn't have is that it is a printed 5-stat. I think one of the biggest things in the game right now is Gorgon's Gaze, and one of the biggest cards that has been in the game for months at this point is Gorgon's Gaze. And a lot of the cards, a lot of the 5 attackers that people are playing in the game right now, think cards like Spectrus, think cards like Galaxy. They can be very, very susceptible to cards like Gorgon's Gaze. Any kind of battle step Gorgon's Gaze on a Spectrus, a Galaxy, or a Viscerus even, can be very devastating for a lot of decks. So having a card like Sorlet that's a printed 5-stat that can't have its stats reduced by a card like Gorgon's Gaze, I think it was very, very advantageous, and this card was absolutely overperformed in this deck this weekend. And then obviously we are also playing the 1 copy of Pegus. I absolutely love Pegus. This is one of the MVPs of the list right here throughout the weekend. And there's a big reason why. So if you've looked at the meta recently in Elestrals, one of the biggest cards in the format right now is a card called Hurricane. It's a card that wipes every single face down rune on the field. for a 3-cost invoke rune at any time. And the existence of that card has led people to be playing in a way where they don't want to set too many of their back row at a time for fear of Hurricane coming in and getting as much advantages as it can and wiping multiple cards in one fell swoop. The way that they'll do that is a lot of people will just set one back row a turn while keeping multiple others in their hands to just kind of use one per turn and then set another next turn and just kind of keep advantage that way. Where Pigus comes in is this kind of is the antithesis to the Hurricane, where if people are playing around Hurricane by setting one card and then I cast the Pigus, well, now they have no back row behind helping their board out. And if the Pigus stays on the board any turn after that, they can now no longer set cards in a way, out of fear of either they have to set one card continuing to play around the Hurricane, and then I can just re-enchant the Pigus next turn and then pop the back row again, and then now they're out 2 back row across 2 turns for basically no advantage gained. Alternatively, they can set multiple back row and then play around the re-enchanted Pigus in some way, so that way, if I do end up re-enchanting the Pigus, they still have another back row to protect them. But now they're playing into Hurricane. So Pigus was honestly one of the MVPs of the deck, specifically for that interaction. There were so many times where people are just playing one back row a turn, and I can stick a Pigus on the board, pop the one back row that they have, and now they're in a pickle that they don't know how many back row to set for the rest of the game. So really loved the win cards. Obviously, the win cards were absolutely broken. You guys might have seen in a deck profile on my channel, my good friend the Architects, who ended up topping the event with a win tempo list. We kind of sat down and figured out how good the win cards were and decided that we wanted to play the win cards. So I'm really, really happy that I ended up playing these cards in this list for sure. And then rounding out our Elestral count on the deck, it wouldn't be a list if we weren't playing triple copies of Eddie. And Eddie is such a funny card to me, because if you had talked to me at the beginning of Moonrise format, I would have been the first person to tell you that Eddie had lost its luster in the format. I thought that going into Moonrise format, this card was no longer going to be the meta-defining threat that it once was in Daybreak format. And that's mostly because I thought that the pace of play was just going to kind of pick up. I thought that Blistrix was going to be a much more dominant force in the deck, in the format, and Eddie is obviously not very good into the Blistrix deck. And just, I thought Ascensions were going to be much more prevalent in the format than they currently are. And anything that can kind of play around Eddie at that point, I thought was going to be a lot more prevalent. But as the format has kind of devolved a little bit back to those low to the ground, 1-cost focused decks, it turns out Eddie is still a really damn good card. And Eddie, especially paired in this deck with Zeus synergy, basically outs any card in the game. This card is just unbelievable. I can't believe I ever doubted my boy Edward. But I'm really, really happy that he ended up making it into this list, because he is an absolute boss. We're playing a kind of a lower Elestral count in this list, actually. I believe it's only 16 1-drops. We have 17 kind of guys if you count the Arcolith, like normal castable guys if you count the Arcolith. And then obviously we have the 3 main Ascensions with the double Griffuse and the VOLTEMPEST. But I never felt like I was missing out on that many guys in this list either. I guess with the amount of times you're able to dig through your deck with cards like Ash Rabbit, being able to trigger it multiple times in a turn at times, I never felt like I was missing out on that many guys, which I think definitely helped me with this deck, or helped me perform with this deck. The fact that I was just never really low on guys. So definitely really enjoyed that lineup for sure. But moving on to into the runes, we are of course playing 3 copies of the main man himself, Zeus. I want to give a quick shout out to MBT, who on my round 1 feature match said that nobody in their right mind would ever play 3 copies of Zeus. And then here I am playing 3 copies of Zeus. Obviously, because it is a VOLTEMPEST deck, we need to see this card as often as possible. And with the Elechic limit in the format now, we are still playing 4 copies of the Zeus, which is the maximum copies we can basically play at this point. This card is unbelievable. There's nothing much really else to say about this card at this point. I've been saying forever that Zeus itself is a removal card, because this paired with any Elestral that has any relevant stat line, basically anything over like 3, can hit over the majority of cards in the game right now. So this card's an absolute house. Honestly, They should put this card back to 1. I know they won't because of the new Firestorms cards, but this card is just absolutely broken, and obviously it has immense synergy with this deck. Absolutely loved having this card. Next, for the invokes, we are playing the one of Earthquake because it is still one of the most powerful cards in the game. I still think this card should be banned, but until then, we're going to continue to play the one of because it is still very powerful. And then another kind of contentious addition in this deck. We are playing 2 copies of Hurricane in the main deck. Now, this card is an interesting case because as of late, like I said, a lot of people are playing around this card no matter what, even whether it's game 1, game 2, game 3, everybody is playing around Hurricane at all times, which kind of, you would think at first glance, makes Hurricane less valuable overall as a card. My biggest thing with Hurricane is that I do agree it has become less valuable in the format because so many people are playing around it. But I've always said Hurricane is a card that if you're going to activate it, it needs to win you the game. And in a lot of decks in the format, especially the ones that are more lower to the ground, like Lunar Aggro, Heal Control, etc., those decks don't have that many explosive plays that they can make in a turn if they were to get a free turn. Most of the time, if they were to get a free turn where they don't have to play into any back row, you're just going to summon like a guy, and then maybe you'll like activate a Zeus or whatever, and then hit over your opponent's board, and then you'll just pass with like a slight tempo. But it's not a board state at that point that is unbreakable. It's not a board state that's going to instantly win you the game. Like a lot of times, just one guy and a couple back row is very breakable for a lot of decks in the format right now. So I felt like playing Hurricane in those decks doesn't really make sense all that often because it doesn't end up winning you the game. It's a card that costs a lot to activate, and obviously it's a very powerful card, but you want it to be winning you the game. Conversely, in game plan decks like the one that I'm playing, VOLTEMPEST, this card does win you the game because if you can set up a turn where you activate Hurricane and you get a free turn to play, and that could lead you into your Gryph-Use Ascension or your VOLTEMPEST Ascension in that one turn. And like I've already said, if VOLTEMPEST hits the board, you're winning the game, like the majority of the time. So Hurricane in that sense, if this card is going to clear a card like Gorgon's Gaze on your opponent's board, or even like a Shield of Achilles to let it make sure that you can like attack for the turn, this card can oftentimes just win you the game on its own. So I felt like playing this card in this deck is very valuable. I think if you are going to play a VOLTEMPEST deck at all, I think you definitely should be playing this card in some way, shape, or form. And this is just another card that overperformed in this deck for me this weekend. Absolutely. The amount of times I cleared a Gorgon's Gaze, I cleared a Shield of Achilles, even if it was like one turn prior. Like I had a bunch of times where you like clear a Gorgon's Gaze, but your opponent like chains it to make it so you can't ascend that turn. And it was just good enough because just getting rid of that Gorgon's Gaze for a future turn meant that I didn't have to worry about it as often going forward. There was one time I was playing a player where I actually cleared 2 Gorgon's Gazes. And it just made it so much easier for me to play the rest of the game, knowing that I didn't have to worry about Gorgon's Gaze as much. So this card just absolutely overperformed in this deck. I definitely think if you're going to play a VOLTEMPEST deck going forward, you should be playing Hurricane in some way, shape, or form. Next, moving on to what is kind of the heart and soul of the deck, and that is the counter rune lineup. Obviously, the biggest thing with the VOLTEMPEST deck is that you need to keep your guys alive on the board because you need to have Ascension fodder to go into your Gryph-Use and VOLTEMPEST plays. And the easiest way to keep your guys alive is by playing a lot of counter runes to back them up. So we are playing 3 copies of Gorgon's Gaze, 3 copies of Shield of Achilles, 2 copies of Altar of Stars, 2 copies of Poison Tipped Arrow, and 2 copies of Tsunami, for a grand total of 12 counter runes in this list. And I think this suite was absolutely perfect. Every single card here that you're seeing here, I don't really have to explain what they do because you've seen all of them numerous times at this point. But every single card that you see here came up and did its job multiple times throughout the weekend. I think every single card here was really, really good. The only thing that you could possibly see change is bumping up Tsunami to 3, and then maybe bumping like a Shield of Achilles down to 2, or even PTA down to 1. just because Tsunami is a really, really powerful card, and there wasn't that many water cards to have to deal with in Dallas. So I felt like Tsunami was a very good card. But other than that, every single card here that you see here was absolutely perfect. These cards definitely helped set up and facilitate my plays, my Voltempest plays, every single time. Basically, every single time that I got Voltempest on the board, it was because I was able to back up my board with multiple back row every single time. Love these cards, absolutely phenomenal. And then, of course, rounding out our 40 card deck list, we are, of course, playing triple copies of Ambrosia. Shout out to the 2 people in the venue on Saturday morning who ended up actually helping me get the last 2 full arts I needed for the playset. And in case you were wondering, yes, you do in fact draw the full arts more. So if you can go out there and get the full art Ambrosias, I would absolutely recommend grabbing them. But obviously we do have to play the 3 because it is an Elestrals deck. And that is our 40 card main deck. I felt every single card in the deck performed well. The deck itself, I think the main deck was near perfect. Again, the only thing you can maybe change is bumping Tsunami up to 3, just changing the ratios on the counter rune suite a little bit. But every other choice in the deck I felt was absolutely perfect. Everything came up and everything performed where it needed to. I really, really enjoyed that main deck. But we're just going to move right into our Spirit deck really quick. And this is just kind of like a really easy, really clean numbers on the Spirit deck here. So we're playing 4 Wind Spirits for obviously our Wind cards. We're playing 2 copies of Terratlas for our Earthquake. We're playing 1 Flurmine for some side deck shenanigans. We're playing 4 Leviathan for our Water cards. And last but not least, we are playing 9 copies of Zaptor for our Thunder cards. This ratio is absolutely perfect. I never felt like I had too much of one spirit or I felt like I needed more. Especially with the Thunder, because we are playing 2 copies of Quackle in the main deck. I felt like I didn't even need more than 9 at any time. The only thing that you can like maybe change is obviously the 1 Flurmine, depending on what your side deck is looking like. But I wanted to play the Flurmine in the main Spirit deck. But anyway, these ratios felt absolutely perfect. Didn't need to change any of these at all. And then the last thing I want to go over is, of course, the side deck itself, because obviously the side deck is one of the most important things for any big tournament that you're going to play. Just kind of making sure that you have all of your bases covered for whatever matchups you're going to see. So starting off with the side deck, we are playing the 2nd and 3rd copies of Boombat. I'm going to kind of go over how I sided for each matchup with the side deck. Obviously, the Boombat is specifically for primarily the Blistrix matchup, being able to out any of the big guys that they get on the board pretty easily. Very, very valuable and in that matchup specifically. In addition, with the other cards that we ended up signing for the Blistrix matchup, which is 3 copies of Divine Blessing and also the 3rd copy of Tsunami in the side deck as well. These 6 cards came into the Blistrix matchup every single time in testing, and of course the one time that I ended up playing it during Swiss. And these are just the best cards that I have for that matchup. And the way that I had my main deck set up as well, there are some very easy side out targets in the main deck for these 6 cards. Obviously, cards like Poison Tipped Arrow, even cards like Shield of Achilles aren't very valuable in the Blistrix matchup. Even cards like Hurricane typically aren't that good. And even cards like Quackle aren't that good in the Blistrix matchup. So typically, these were the cards that I would end up siding out in the Blistrix matchup for these 6 cards. These cards are obviously very, very good, and they come up in some other matchups as well, but primarily for the Blistrix matchup, they are there for. Next, we have our side cards for the heal control matchup, and that is 3 copies of Quackle, the 3rd copy of Quackle, in addition to 3 copies of Spoiled Fruit. Obviously, these Spoiled Fruits is a very good card into the heal matchup. Obviously, stopping at least one of their healers can be a very good tempo swing in that matchup. And then playing the 3rd Quackle as well. We kind of want to just play into the heal matchup's own game at that point. So we'll stack up on the 3 copies of Quackle in the deck for that matchup as well. In addition, this is also just some extra insurance for any kind of time shenanigans, because it is a competitive format. We do have to worry about the round timer and stuff. So we want to make sure that we have a good matchup for that scenario as well. Next, we have the cards that we side in for the Lunar Aggro matchup primarily, because again, these are the 3 primary decks that we prepared for this event. But obviously, a lot of these cards have applications in other matchups as well. But for the Lunar Aggro matchup, I was playing the 1-of copy of Resting on Your Laurels, and of course, the double copies of Cryoblast, which is for the Fleur Mine. And then also for the Lunar matchup, we are playing what I'm calling the MVP of the side deck, and that is double copies of Cockatoodle. And I want to give a quick shout out to my good friend Dimax for putting me onto this card, because he told me about this card. He might not have been the first person to discover this tech, but he was the first person to bring up this card to me. And he basically told me, yo, Cockatoodle is absolutely broken. And I basically told him, you're a moron. And I am so sorry to Dimax for telling that he's a moron, because Cockatoodle was insane for me this weekend. I ended up playing 2 Lunar Aggro decks in Swiss, and I sided this card into both of them, and it came up both times, and both times it was really, really good. So I want to give a formal apology to Dimax for doubting him on that one. Cockatoodle was the MVP of the side deck for me, and obviously these 3 cards are also very good into that matchup as well. Very, very good, very clean side deck, I think, for that 15. Every single card that I sided in came up at some point throughout the weekend, and I was very happy with how the side deck performed. And that was the deck that I ended up playing for the Elestrals Dallas Open 2025, the first ever in-person premiere event for the Elestrals TCG. It's still insane, the fact that I am able to say that I was a part of that event. Like I said, it was just one of the greatest experiences I think I've ever had playing TCGs in my lifetime. And I encourage any of you out there that are thinking kind of on the fence of if you want to travel to any of these events, I absolutely encourage you guys to just come out to these events, and just at least one time if you can. And who knows, maybe I'll be at the event too, and we can end up experiencing the event together. You can call my hair stupid or something, I don't know. But I do know at the end of the day, Elestrals is planning to do more in-person events in the future, and I implore you, if you are able to travel out to one of these events, or multiple of these events at any point, I highly, highly recommend. I can't recommend enough how much enjoyment I got out of an event like this. And it's only the first one. It's an event that's going to continue to get better in structure and just the way it's ran. And I can't wait to see where it goes from here. So thank you all so much for watching. Again, make sure you're subscribed to the channel so you don't miss any of the videos that I plan on uploading. Again, we have that vlog coming from the event, as well as several other videos surrounding the Dallas Open that I still have planned that will be coming out, as well as any other Elestrals videos that are coming out soon. Again, we have Firestorm coming out in a couple months, and Clash, again, that's also coming out. So there's a lot of stuff that I have planned to do for this channel going forward, and you guys are definitely not going to want to miss any of that. But until then, thank you all again so much for watching this video. I'll see you guys in the next one. Peace.